hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and I thought I would share a recent podcast appearance, partly because it's me having a conversation with another hypnotherapist. That hypnotherapist is called Lenora Edwards. She is a TEDx speaker and has been a speaker at many different conferences, specifically on changing how you think and with binge eating patterns. But she has a podcast called the Entrepreneurs Forum podcast, and she asked me about my journey into hypnosis, areas of speciality, and some of the questions that a lot of you might find interesting if you want to learn more about me rather than just hear the hypnosis that I do. So I'm going to encourage you, you don't really need to find a quiet place for this. This is a conversational podcast, more like an interview conversational chat. So just make yourself comfortable and enjoy this show. Oh, and by the way, if you want to check out Lenora's podcast, I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can hear this one on her podcast, but also any other episodes as well. So be sure to check that out. Okay, take care and enjoy.
All right. Welcome back to the Entrepreneurs Forum podcast. Today, we have an amazing man. Not only is he a wonderful colleague of mine, I have also gotten to know him over the last several months. His name is Adam Cox, and he is a clinical hypnotherapist, an NLP practitioner, an entrepreneur, and the host of one of the most unique podcasts in the entire world. So you can imagine how excited I am to have him here with us and be able to get to share his brilliance. He's the creator of a podcast known as The Hypnotist, and it has amassed more than 20 million downloads and streams worldwide. Unlike most podcasts in the mental health and personal development space, Adam doesn't talk about transformation. He lets listeners experience it, which truly brings it to the next level. Through more than 2,000 episodes, Adam has brought real hypnotherapy sessions to a global audience, helping people address things like anxiety, confidence, habits, performance, emotional eating, trauma, and so much more. You absolutely have to tune into his podcast after this. Beyond hypnosis, Adam has also built something every entrepreneur strives for, which is a category of one. Adam, thank you so much for coming to spend time with us.
Lenora, that's the best intro I've ever had. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm ecstatic to hear that. And it is all 1,000% accurate. It is such a lovely time to have with you and to be able to share so much that you offer with other people. Now, I know, as I mentioned, that you are one of the most successful hypnotists. And that being said, if we rewind a bit, who was Adam before all of that?
A deeply shy, timid, insecure boy, essentially. That's, I think, what got me interested into hypnosis and psychology was very strong beliefs of not being enough and low self-worth. And the silver lining of that cloud is a desire to not be that way. Okay. And I think if you deeply believe that you're not enough and you want to make yourself better, it kind of gives your life a bit of a quest. And I'm not really sure where that belief of not being enough came from. I'm grateful for it now. But when I was, 9, 10, 11, I absolutely believed it to be true. And to some extent, it's true for everyone in the sense that everyone can be better. But at the time, I thought by being better, that meant I wasn't acceptable and enough as I was. Yeah. Now I know that's not true. But it did launch me into this pursuit of self-improvement, which is an odd thing for like an 11 or 12-year-old to kind of be interested in that thing. But it came from the place of, if there's a problem, then let's try and fix it.
Yeah, I love that, especially because I do think it's part of being human wrestling with this idea of not enough and figuring out your worth and deserving, especially because we learn these words at such a young age, especially when we say to children, like, well, do you think you deserve ice cream after this? Or have you done X, Y, and Z today? Like constantly having to prove their worth and their value. So we get these words and we make these definitions at a very, very young age. And those definitions don't work with us as we evolve. How did you come to find hypnosis? As in, like, did you notice this at 11 or 12? Like you picked up a book and started to notice that, this is an interesting plot twist.
Yeah, I did. So one of the things that I stumbled across when I was maybe 11 or 12 was this idea that if you learn skills that amplify other skills, that's more useful than just learning a skill. So there was two skills that I learned fairly young. One was the element of mnemonics. So this is kind of memory techniques. So being able to, acquire and recall things. So I've got a very good memory. So my clients are quite surprised sometimes when I've not met them for a year and I can kind of almost mirror back exactly what was going on in the last session. So I've got a very good memory, and that came from learning memory techniques at a very young age. And then also speed reading. And I thought, I made the evaluation that if I had a good memory and I can cover a lot of ground with speed reading, then that element of becoming smarter or more knowledgeable, that would be useful. And when you do that, I think the wonderful thing about learning is that you can't complete that game of learning. Every time you learn something, it becomes the head of a hydra. There's more things to learn. And I'm very grateful for that desire and kind of thirst for learning. I think I wouldn't be where I was if I didn't have the belief that I can learn anything and also enjoy learning. So reading a lot of books, going to the library all the time, I stumbled across a book on stage hypnotism by Ormond McGill, which some of the older, kind of generation might recall Ormond McGill as kind of like a bit of a pioneer in kind of stage hypnosis. So at the age of 12, 13, I'm learning about things like magnetic fingers and the, finger locking technique and arm catalepsy and just kind of testing it out on people. So that planted a seed of an idea of hypnosis. There was a very popular TV show in the UK called The Hypnotic World of Paul McKenna. So these days, Paul McKenna is known as kind of a personal development writer, but in the UK, he's primarily known as a hypnotist, as a stage hypnotist first. So that again created a bit of curiosity. The real catalyst for hypnotherapy, rather than let's say stage hypnotism, was leaving home at the age of 18, studying psychology at degree level, and then having very intense social anxiety and struggling with that. And again, having that desire to fix it, and then learning as much as I could about NLP and hypnosis and effectively testing those principles on myself. So I always tell my clients that I was my first client. It was me figuring out what worked. And I think when you look at things through the lens of what works and what helps and what is beneficial, what's useful, you look at things more objectively. I think there's almost kind of like a cult vibe that sometimes certain therapeutic modalities get, and they end up drinking their own Kool-Aid and kind of saying stuff even if it isn't true. Whereas for me, I couldn't care about theories. I cared about, like, did it make a difference? Did I believe something different? Did I feel something different? And by looking at it through that objective lens of does it help? And obviously your own life is the experience of that. You get to think, oh, okay, that works and that doesn't. So at a very young age, I decided that interventional therapy like counseling and psychodynamic and psychoanalysis, not that useful because change isn't even the goal. And then interventional therapy, certain, let's say, CBT techniques, certain elements of hypnotherapy and NLP, very effective. You can actually have emotions that go away very quickly. You can change belief systems radically. And that was where I kind of really believed that I had found something that was a bit of a magical power. And, one of the early books of Richard Bandler is The Structure of Magic. And I think that was done for a reason, because when someone's struggling with something and then they have a transformation, it does feel magical and seem magical to the outside world. And I believe that, like, transforming a human from one way to another way is a pretty magical thing. And I'm blessed now that, being a hypnotherapist, I get to do that magic and kind of work with people and help them create changes in their life that they want to.
Very much so. Oh my gosh, there were so many golden nuggets there, and I'm writing them down as you're talking. I love, and even when you notice that it is, sorry, are you getting feedback on your end? Sorry, I was getting feedback. Okay. Okay. We're good.
Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I heard me, and then I wanted to make sure. So I'm just going to mark that also. Okay. I love that you mentioned that, because I noticed so many golden nuggets as you were talking. And even when you mentioned that you look through the lens of, is it helpful? Is it beneficial? You can feel how grounded and logical that really is. And it's very different than some people, and I completely agree. They commit to this one thing and they say, like, it has to be this way and it has to fit this model. Whereas I know, especially in our conversations and several of the practitioners that you and I interact with, it really has become, it's not, it has to be this model. It's, did the person get the change? And if not, how can we really navigate that? And I think that's so profoundly important. And I agree completely. I was also my own client or test subject, whatever label you want to give it, because I was also in discomfort and not knowing how to navigate it. And then looking out into the world going, well, there's still discomfort for other people. Like, how can I help me? And then move forward. And one thing also, I love that you went to school for psychology. That must have been really fascinating. I did not study psychology. So that, especially with all the things that you were learning, and I can totally picture you going to the library. I love that you mentioned that. I just see, younger Adam going into a library, picking out his books. I think that's fantastic. When did you start to notice that you could make a career of this?
I think because I was so introverted, shy, insecure, when I figured out that I could change how I think, how I feel, change my own belief systems, I think my desire to help other people in my 20s, I'll be honest, was non-existent. That wasn't my motive. My motive was to build businesses, to make lots of money. Because if you've had very low status and then you figure out a way to get in a highly resourceful state, then particularly as a kind of a young man at the time, I wanted all the things I didn't have. So it was kind of like, for me, financial success and accomplishing in business became a real drive. So throughout my 20s, I kind of relentlessly kind of pursued that. So I built businesses. My first main business that I had staff was at 23 years old. I still own that business now. I'm a chairman of a company that has about 20 staff. I don't run it now because now I get to do hypnotherapy all the time. And then the cash flow that came from that business, I then put into property and kind of investments. So one of the things I talk about is I'm equally passionate about financial freedom as I am hypnotherapy. I have a program called Hypnotic Wealth that kind of fuses the two together. And I was obsessed with that. What changed for me, though, was when I got to 35 years old, I discovered this principle, this Japanese idea of ikigai. And I love Venn diagrams anyway, because it helps make sense of kind of opposing forces. And immediately I could see myself in the ikigai of, regarding my PR agency that I was running, the world needed it. I could get paid for it, and I was competent in it, but I was not passionate about it. And therefore, there's this kind of feeling that I think a lot of successful people can get, which is a feeling of, I should be happier than I am. I should feel more fulfilled than I am. And yet I'm, sensory acuity is one of the things that therapists tend to have. I was aware that I couldn't make it up. I couldn't pretend I didn't feel that way. And the circle missing was the passion, the mission element. So again, kind of went inwards and and asked myself, right, what are the things that I think about or like learning about, even if I'm not being paid, even if I don't have to do it, what is that? And it was everything to do with the mind and psychology. And I was still continuing to read books on hypnosis and NLP, even though I had nothing to do with that. Like that doesn't exist in the PR agency world. So it dawned on me that, okay, if this is the thing, the missing circle of the Ikigai Venn diagrams, maybe I should do that. And literally the next day, in fact, that night when I discovered it, I saw that there was a postgraduate course in clinical hypnotherapy, and it was starting in a few weeks. So I made an appointment for the next day, and I went to the London College of Clinical Hypnotherapy, met the guy, signed up straight away. And then that was like 3 years of postgraduate study. And then I became a hypnotherapist. And my goal, and it was strange because, again, this photographic memory that I have, I could recall a conversation when I started in the radio industry where a trainer told me a story of a lady he knew that wanted to be a hairstylist. And the pathway, and this was an Australian lady, and he was an Australian trainer, and he was telling me this story of this hairstylist who, the traditional pathways, you go to kind of hairstyling academies, and then you get an apprentice at some kind of salon, and then you kind of work your way up and get a chair. And she decided she wanted to kind of skip all that and go straight to the most prestigious street in Sydney. And her approach was, I'll work for free. So she went to the salon. She said, I'll sweep up hair. I'll do this. I'll clean. She do this. She made friends with everyone there. And then a chair opened up and they said, do you want this? So then suddenly she got that. And he told me this story about how she kind of found the shortcut to go to the most kind of prestigious place. So immediately after I got my qualification in clinical hypnotherapy, the most prestigious place in the UK is Harley Street. It's where the rich and famous get their cosmetic surgery. It's where they have high-level therapy. And it's like, right, I'm going to get the best clinic on the best suite on the best address. So I did, number 2 Harley Street, overlooking Grosvenor Square. And that's where I was based. And because I also had a PR agency, it then meant that I had some of my team, when they weren't working on campaigns, reaching out to low-level celebrities, offering them a free hypnosis session in exchange for either we could turn it into a press release or recorded testimonials. And therefore, it gave me the ability to get PR coverage, but also legitimately say hypnotherapist to celebrities. And that I still have that as a bit of an intro for my podcast. Because what I understood is that a lot of what makes hypnotherapy work is what's called the prestige. It's the perception of the therapist. So even though I had virtually no experience at that point, because I'm in the best location and they can kind of see, and I don't wear suits anymore, but back then I was wearing like expensive 3-piece suits and all of this. And it's all a halo effect of, oh, this person must be good. Kind of a fake it till you make it. But what it dawned on me is that there's certain things that you can learn by reading, and there's certain things that you need to learn by doing. And the mantra that I had in my head is that nobody learns to swim by reading a book. You have to jump in the pool. And from my perspective, I thought the equivalent of jumping in the pool is seeing lots of clients. So I obsessively found ways. Sometimes I would do free sessions for celebrities, or I would do sessions for content, or I would do whatever I could just to see clients all the time. And that effectively built a reputation, if that makes sense, so that I feel I'm competent now because I've seen thousands of clients. And I think that's the tragedy for a lot of hypnotherapists, is that they've got the technical understanding, they've got the certificate and the qualification, but they haven't spent enough time in the pool, and therefore then they never actually acquire that unconscious competence in that area. And I think that's the thing that I did slightly different. So I just took that hairstylist model and did exactly the same thing for hypnotherapy, and just thought, right, what would be the pinnacle of hypnotherapy is kind of being in this address, right? Start there and then move from that place.
That is an amazing story. Absolutely love that. And especially because if in the world that you and I often see, at least on social media, when people become or get their degree or their certification, rather than when people get their certification in hypnotherapy or in hypnosis, it's market it, market it, market it. And you completely took a different approach, and that story really had a lot of weight for you. And that story is definitely going to stick with me, and I have no doubt it's going to stick with listeners. That is a phenomenal story. Oh my gosh, what a great idea to really jump right into the pool. Very, we're going to swim.
And it was two things that kind of joined together. For me, what appealed to me about NLP is this idea that you can model strategies from other people. And those strategies could be a strategy for procrastination, or a strategy for addiction, or a strategy for motivation, but also a strategy for branding or perception. And I think a lot of people are going about things by trial and error, which is the slow way. And the fast way is to find the structural level at what gets results, and then map that across to the context that you're in. And I think a lot of people have the ability to do that. And I think that there's a missed opportunity there. If there is a particular strategy that works incredibly well, let's say in the finance industry, but that the structure of it works well, why not map that across to whatever the individual industry is? And you're highly likely to get similar results. So it was the kind of the fusion of the NLP idea and this anecdote. And he was doing hypnosis on me, that trainer, when he told me that story, because I don't even know if that anecdote is true, but it was true for me, because I imagined, a young, experienced hairstylist with a goal, doing whatever it took to kind of get to the end quicker, and therefore it created, a neural pathway for me of, okay, this is a workable strategy, but it only was executed 10 years later. The big change for me, and it was good that I started in Harley Street, because I was seeing clients face to face. The next big catalyst for me was that when the pandemic came along, I'm paying a lot of rent, I'm paying a lot of advertising on Google AdWords. And when the pandemic came, I knew that I would be seeing less clients face to face, and it didn't make sense to have an expensive, prestigious location if clients aren't going to see you face to face. So I terminated the lease agreement in Harley Street, stopped all of my Google AdWords, and then launched a podcast. And that podcast is called The Hypnotist. And I like listening to podcasts. It's an incredible time to be alive, because you're able to be a fly on the wall or eavesdrop on kind of conversations that even 25 years ago would have been impossible to access. And yet these days we can listen to conversations with, doctors and neuroscientists and billionaires and all these things that we couldn't have done before. And we have access. And I think people underestimate the power of a podcast. And I like hypnosis podcast. I think Brain Software by Mike Mandel is incredible for learning hypnosis. And there's lots of YouTube channels where they do hypnosis. But what I thought was missing was real hypnotherapy sessions, because most hypnotherapy happens behind closed doors. You don't really know what's happening. And I thought, okay, what if I share the actual hypnosis that I did with a client, but only record my voice and therefore protect the confidentiality of the client? And then what it does is it demystifies hypnosis. Now, they're only hearing my version of hypnosis. Lots of people do it in different ways. And the seed of the idea that came from was a book by Richard Bandler called Magic in Action. And what I liked about that is that it was the transcript of the actual interventions, the techniques. And I learned more from that than just someone, let's say, describing a six step reframe or the swish pattern. I want to see, right, what was the interaction of how it was actually done? So that was the premise, that, by listening to my podcast, you actually get exactly the same hypnosis session that the client paid several $100s for. You get it free, but the trade-off is that it was calibrated for them. There might be certain suggestions or metaphors that are perfect for them and not quite right for anyone else, because I made it for them, but you get it free and they had to pay for it. And that's the trade-off. And when I launched that podcast, I had very low expectations. My pitch to myself was, if I can help one person out there in the world as a result of them hearing my hypnosis that wouldn't have been helped had I not done that, that's success. And now I get messages all the time. Oh, it's like I can finally sleep and I've quit this thing and all of that. And it feels very fulfilling, but it came from me wanting a creative outlet for my hypnosis and this idea that there will be somewhere out there in the world that I will never meet, never know, who has been positively impacted by a recording I'd done anyway. So it's almost that idea of, how do we turn the sawdust into something valuable? And that's what the premise is. And when I started, it was just over 6 years ago. When it started, it was one episode a week, and now it's daily. And as you very kindly said in the introduction, recently hit 20 million streams and downloads, which completely blows my mind, because I could never have known that me doing hypnosis with people and just happening to record it would ever impact that many people. But it's a wonderful time that we're alive in right now, that you can do that.
That is so profound, that you just, again, so many beautiful golden nuggets. I love that you mentioned that you think people underestimate the power of a podcast, because I can absolutely follow that thought process. And I also love that you took sessions where they recorded your voice, which absolutely is incredibly wonderful and rich and very grounded. You can hear the certainty when you talk, and we'll have all your links in the show notes. But for those of you who are tuning in right now and haven't listened to this piece, your voice is such a carrier of compassion and also understanding and also conviction of change. And you couldn't have any of that had you not had the experiences that you had when you were younger, and working yourself through those processes and revealing those layers or releasing those masks that we often are conditioned to have just by simply being in the world that we are in. That is absolutely incredible. And I love that it became a creative outlet for you. And also, beautiful word, demystifying hypnosis, which is so, so well said, because really people can carry this idea of it and these misconceptions of it. And you so beautifully share it and take away that worry, that fear, that concern, and you demystify it to say, no, it's not what you thought it was. It is this, and how powerful that is. That is incredible. What do you love most about, especially after 2,000 episodes and over an amazing number of downloads, what do you love most about being able to help people in this way?
I think that it comes down to that ikigai idea that actually when I was prioritizing just myself, then what it does is it leads to a feeling of emptiness at some level. And that word fulfillment is very easy to say, but quite difficult to define. And I think at some level, if you are doing something that is good for you and good for the world, it's objectively better than if it's just good for you. And I think the nature of therapy is that it's already impactful with the client that you're working with. It's making a difference to them. What I like about the podcast and why I'm still doing it 6 years on is that my focus is the client in front of me, but as a byproduct of that, it might impact 1,000 people I'll never meet. And I think there is a lot of people sometimes, and I felt that way at a time in my life, like, what can I get? What can I take? And actually, when you think that way, it can cause an element of scarcity because you look at the world as a zero-sum game. It can create an element of paranoia in a way, because if you're trying to take and get, it stands to reason that the belief system would be that other people are trying to get and take from you, and that makes you very kind of protective. So I think that element of what makes it fulfilling is this idea that if you give more value than you take, then at some level, you can't attribute that to purely financial metrics. And the vanity metrics aren't as important as how I look at it, which is, of those 20 million downloads, let's say there was, 2 million people that have heard it. Some of those 2 million people, their lives are on a different trajectory now than had they not listened to my thing. Because if someone has an addiction and they change one addiction in their life, that could change their lifespan by 10 years. And what's the ripple effect of that additional 10 years of life and being healthier as well? If someone loses weight, it isn't just the numbers on a scale, it's their self-esteem, it's their confidence, it's a spring in their step. And what if that leads to a new relationship that they weren't expecting? So when I look at it in that ripple effect, it's kind of like what I'm doing, it's not purely altruistic. I get paid from my clients, and there is a bit of karmic marketing by me sharing a lot of stuff for free. That's how clients find me, and that's how I get new clients, and some people will buy courses and digital products from me. But fundamentally, there will be some people out there that I don't get a penny from and are still positively impacted. And I think that itself leads to an evaluation of its contribution, its generosity at some level. And I think when you frame it that way, it feels pretty good. It feels pretty good to leave the world better off than if you didn't exist. And I think that's a nice way of framing it.
I love that. Absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things, is to always leave something better than when you found it. And absolutely, I think when people listen to your podcast or when they hear something that you've shared, they are being left better than when your voice had not found them, because of the impact that you offer people, because of the insights that you offer, and because of the level of awareness that you help people raise up to. They raise themselves up just simply by hearing your perspective, or giving these they'll have this takeaway, and then they'll hear something afterwards and they're like, oh, it reminds me of that. And they're ultimately, you're right, completely in a different timeline, but also better because of the beauty in how you share and how you put that out there, like that give and that receive. Absolutely.
And I would say it sits on the spectrum, because I've seen comments and I've received messages of extremities, scammer, kind of like horrible voice, all this. And then at the other end of the spectrum, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for this. That's about as big an extreme as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
So I'm not thinking that, 1 million people in the world are better off. But even if it's 10, even if it's 50, even if it's 100, it's, and unfortunately, a lot of people are taught to not rock the boat, to not put their head above the parapet, to blend in. And unfortunately, there's people that get to the end of their lives that did everything they were told. They got the job, they never caused a fuss. And their impact, the dent they make in the world, is relatively small because of the fear of doing something where they could be judged, or doing something that could be criticized. And it's super easy for people to mock anyone from the sidelines. It's more difficult to stand up and do something and learn something and attempt to make a difference, even though some people will criticize it or kind of mock it. I think you just have to bake all of that into the same cake and say, okay, fundamentally, are you willing for a little bit of negativity if fundamentally the positives outweigh the negatives? And as long as that equation is like that, it makes sense. If it ever reached a point where I was getting consistent feedback of boring, like this is a waste of time, I'd be like, okay, like this quest is finished now. I need a new quest. But for now, this quest is continually fulfilling, and I can't see a point where I would stop doing hypnotherapy or stop sharing my hypnosis, because it seems to be helping people and I enjoy it creatively. I enjoy even the technical elements of kind of recording, editing, and putting the music on. And it is that element where I look at life as a game, and you can't ever complete the game, but you might get to the next level of the game. And it's kind of like, okay, well, you may as well play a game that's fun for you. And here's what's interesting. A lot of people, when they ask, what do I do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a hypnotherapist. Why would you do that? You know, they're confused by it, because that wouldn't be their thing. Their dream might be, okay, make money, lie on a beach, or, you know, whatever it might be. And that's the great thing, is that you only have to figure out what your thing is. And when you find that thing is that you're passionate about, do that thing that you're passionate about. Who cares if someone else doesn't get it? Like, quite often, like, they'll either find their thing that they do get or they won't. But I think there's a lot of people afraid to pursue their thing. And I put it off for years. And I think it was part of my perceptions. For me, the hypnosis perception I had was either the sinister Machiavellian stage hypnotist, look into my eyes, you know, that kind of thing, or the cardigan wearing old lady that's kind of like almost the archetype of, if you've seen the movie Get Out, you know, that kind of old lady with it's like, that was my kind of perception of what a hypnotist or hypnotherapist is. But I think when you embrace the thing, then you make it your own. And, you know, I would say there isn't a typical hypnotist or a typical hypnotherapist. It's just people that do hypnotherapy, and they do it in all different ways, in all different styles. And when people hear my style of hypnosis, all they're really hearing is my style of hypnosis. That isn't hypnosis, it's just my style of hypnosis. But if that can introduce it to people that wouldn't have found it, then I'm happy with that.
I love that. Again, so many golden nuggets. You've shared so much with us. Thank you so much. I have one more question, and I love that you have shared. I know I said it several times. Thank you for sharing. And I love all that you shared in helping as many people as you have, and in being able to share the way that you do with the world. How differently do you define success from when you were in your 20s to now?
Oh, hugely, hugely. I think there was a particular moment that it dawned on me that the value that I thought I was chasing wasn't the value that I wanted. And when I was that shy, introverted, insecure, you know, teenager, and I was writing up my goals and creating my vision board, it was, you know, the Lamborghini convertible. When I had enough money to buy it, it dawned on me I didn't want it. And it was that element of, what am I doing that for? You know, having that Lamborghini would only because I'm still sold on the idea that I care what other people think, and that somehow my value equates to them seeing me driving around in an expensive car. And what it dawned on me in that moment is that it was all about optionality, and emotional resources are optionality. It gives you the choice, but not the obligation. Money gives you the choice without the obligation. And all of that, for me, linked to freedom. So for me, success now is the freedom to live life the way you want to live life. That, for me, is how I define success. And how I live life might be different from how you live life. But so long as you get to live it in your way and I get to live it on mine, it's still freedom, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas there are people, and I think things like Instagram and TikTok has made this almost more extreme, is that a lot of people are chasing approval. They're chasing validation. They're chasing status. And the problem with that is that is going to be an ever-depleting resource. That if you need the status and the validation, you have to keep chasing that. And you're giving a lot of power. The locus of control is extrinsic rather than intrinsic. Whereas if success is living in accordance with your values, and my highest value is freedom, then as long as you're doing that, you feel fulfilled every time you're doing the thing. You don't have to wait for success. Like, you're being successful by living life on your terms. So the fact that I haven't worked for anyone else in 25 years, the last employer that I had was when I was 23 years old. I'll never be on a paycheck of someone else. The fact that I could choose not to work for forever if I didn't want to, and I'm choosing to work, all of that makes me feel successful because I'm living in accordance with my values. And I think that's how I define it now. But if I went back to that 20-year-old version of me and said, what would success be? I would probably say it would be a certain amount of net worth and, a certain amount of status or perception. And now I definitely don't think that.
Yeah. I love that. That is incredible. Thank you so much, Adam. We will have all of your awesome details in the show notes. To our listeners, thank you for spending time here with us. Definitely go check out the podcast, The Hypnotist. And until next time, stay well.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of The Hypnotist. If you've enjoyed this episode or got some value from it, please give it a 5-star rating and review. And maybe you know someone that would also benefit from this particular episode, in which case share the episode with them so they can also get the benefit too. And if you would like to listen to this episode where it's just the hypnosis, so no intro, no outro, no explanation, just the hypnosis and completely ad-free, there will be a link in the description where you can subscribe at a very low cost and only get access to the hypnosis. So if that's of interest, please check that out. Thank you again for being a regular listener of The Hypnotist, and I'll see you again soon for more.